On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk to CEDIA's new co-CEOs, as well as Epson's suing over specs, and theaters are just like fine wine. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 253, Emotive Language.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Vanco International. Learn the technology behind the award-winning EVOIP, AV over IP system. Become EVOIP certified today.
And by
Peerless AV, driving technology through innovation.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Giles Sutton. He is currently the SVP of Industry Engagement, and something new that we'll get into in a second from CEDIA. How you doing, Giles?
Hi, Matt. I'm doing well. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Then we have Alex Caposolantro. He's the founder of Josh AI. How you doing, Alex?
Doing great. It's good to be here.
Thank you for being here as well. Before we kick off some stories, and we have a bunch to get to, Alex, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is this you? Is this you and Josh AI? Is it Josh AI? You guys are doing a really cool industry Secret Santa for those in the US, which excludes both Giles and myself, but you know, it's a great start. Just before we jump into the stories of the day, tell us why you guys decided to jump into the Secret Santa world of fun.
Yeah, so this is something that I think about every year, and truly just, it's always a thought that doesn't happen. And I think with COVID, I finally said, it's not a lot of work to make a very first version get off the ground. It doesn't need to be a lot. And we just said, you know what, let's keep it just to the US for now so that shipping costs, everything else are pretty reasonable. But just put it out there and said, who in the industry would like to be part of a Secret Santa? For those who don't know, Secret Santas are kind of brilliant because you set a price cap of sort of, everyone getting a gift about the same price. And then you send it completely anonymously. And so you don't know who got you. You fill out a little form of what things you might want, what things to avoid. So if you like wine, if you have a dog, that kind of stuff. And we had about 50 people sign up for it. It's underway right now, and it's been really fun kind of seeing people's engagement. And I just think this is something that we as an industry can do so much bigger next year. And so I'm actually glad that we've got Giles here at CEDIA, and even Matt talking about AVNation and everything that you do. I think we can make this a global thing where, there's sort of a Canadian version, maybe a UK version. And I think we just make it a full-on industry thing next year because honestly, it doesn't take a lot of effort, but it's super fun. And the brilliant part is once people start getting their gifts, trying to figure out a place where they can share what they got, because that's when the real fun comes out. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we just kicked this off, sent out the matches yesterday, so it's really fresh, and I'm excited to see what people end up doing with it.
Yeah, it's a really cool initiative, and I think we can work something out for next year and try to grow this a little bit internationally too, because we matter too outside of the US. Just don't try and ship liquor across the borders. That's a whole other animal, so don't touch that. The other thing I wanted to mention off the top is, and you can see this on CE Pro and a bunch of other websites, the CEDIA award submissions are now open for 2021. It's a little bit earlier than normal, so go check that out. Speaking of CEDIA, let's kick this off with our first story of the day that comes to us from AVNation.tv. CEDIA has announced their new interim co-CEOs, hence my lead-in at the start. CEDIA has announced that Giles Sutton, who, as we mentioned, is the Senior Vice President of Member Success and Sales, and Corey Dickerson, Senior Vice President of Operations, are going to step up together and take over as interim co-CEOs, replacing Tabitha O'Connor, who's departing in January. Giles, thank you for obviously joining us in general, but thanks for coming on to talk about this new role and what this means. And first of all, I'd like you to jump in for a second and just tell us what this means going forward. Obviously, there will be some changes, but does this change anything from kind of the current state of where the association is and that plan and that future direction that CEDIA has been planning to go?
Thanks, Matt. Well, I think, the first thing to say is obviously we need to recognize, the outgoing CEO, Tabitha O'Connor, who, was with the association for 18 years. And it's on her watch that we've seen some, amazing changes to the association. And for someone to have been so dedicated to CEDIA for such a long time, I mean, it's really an amazing achievement. So, I think the interim role, we feel, both Corey and myself, really kind of humbled that the board have really sort of trusted us to, I see it as kind of taking care of the association during this interim period while the board carry out its search for the long-term CEO. And that will take probably a bit of time, probably, it's going to take months, hopefully not years, but some months to actually determine the right person for that role. What Corey and I really want to do is really focus on, the strategic plan that we've had in place for the last 3 years, and really start to sort of focus our efforts. We're in an interesting point right now with the association. It's been certainly a challenging year without having in-person events. We haven't had, Expo. It's been challenging to build, engagement with our members. We know now actually what we really need to be doing is prioritizing. And a lot of what Corey and I want to do is look at all the things that we do and really hone in on how we can add value to our core customers. And that's really, the integrators, as well as manufacturers that support us. So really the first step for us is really laying out our plan, what we think we can achieve during this interim period, and working with the board to ensure that it aligns with our strategy, and then executing it.
Yeah, very good. And again, congratulations. That's fantastic. Alex, one of the things that Giles touched on, and the articles touch on it as well, is that obviously this is an interim position, that they're going to begin a global search for a full-time CEO. What does that look for? What should the association be looking for in a CEO?
That's a great question. And for those who don't know, I do serve on the CEDIA board, so full transparency on that. This is arguably the most important thing that I will participate in as a board member, because finding and setting the right CEO and the right leadership team will either put CEDIA on the right path or potentially on a, not the best path. And so we're spending a lot of time as a board really talking about what are the characteristics that we're looking for, what are the sort of past experiences that we want this person to bring to the table. But we're also talking to various industry leaders and past board members who have strong opinions about this. And really, we're just putting a lot of effort into what's the right job description and the right sort of qualities and traits that would need to be exhibited in this person to help drive CEDIA in the right direction. And I think, when we look back at the last, 10, 20 years, we've learned a lot. Sometimes when people don't work out, we had Vin Bruno for a bit who, did some things great, ultimately didn't work out as a long-term CEO. We learned a bit. We learned about these things, to look for, these things maybe to try to avoid. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be a long process. Typically these are 6 to 9 month searches for any organization trying to hire a CEO, similar to what we're trying to do. But we want to take our time. We want to do it the right way. And we're just super happy that Giles and Corey are stepping up, because it makes it a really nice transition. They know the organization, they know the members, they know the strategy. And so we think we're in a really healthy place. But it will be exciting to have this conversation a year from now and to look back and say, look at everything that happened, look at the new leadership. And I'm hoping that people will feel really excited about the direction forward.
Yeah. Very, very good. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our next story of the day. This comes to us from Residential Systems. Epson has filed lawsuits against Amazon projector sellers for misleading advertising claims. If you have ever gone down the rabbit hole that is Amazon projectors, you will find a wide variety of products from manufacturers you've never heard of. And if you do that, if you do go down that rabbit hole, you'll find that there are a litany of terms and specs and things that to your discerning eyes don't line up. So Alex, let me come back to you on this one. This has been a big issue with the industry for quite a long time. And, we talked pre-show about how, from amp manufacturers to speaker manufacturers, people are creative, we'll call it, with the numbers in general within the industry. But when you get into these general consumer products, that liberal use of numbers just expands dramatically into just total and utter, lack of anything with substance. Like, these numbers are out of left field. What does the industry need to do to try and maintain some level of, dare I say, integrity when it comes to numbers and how to keep those terms and those ratings mean something?
Yeah, so I have a particular viewpoint which might not be what everyone agrees with, but just going to kind of give you where, the point of view from where I'm sitting. So the first thing is, this goes way beyond just our industry. Advertising and marketing in general is so full of fluff. You go back to the 70s and 80s when the sugar-free term started coming out, and the reality is foods don't need to have zero sugar to be termed sugar-free. And that's just one of many examples. The word diet doesn't always actually mean that this is a healthy item or that it's low calorie or low sugar. And this is just something that we face with all products. And you see it not just with technical terminology, but companies will often use various quantifiable metrics to inflate numbers that don't actually mean anything. In my industry, for example, meaning voice control, you'll often see products touting the number of microphones they have. The reality is you can have a 2-microphone system that far outperforms a 10-microphone system. And so more microphones doesn't mean better quality, doesn't mean better listening. And this is true of many, many products. So I just want to set the stage that we as a global marketing, kind of philosophy are tricking customers every day. And I don't think that's going to change. So when you get into what we as an industry can do, other than accept that that's going to happen, accept that you're going to see these terms from these, no-name companies that, get us upset, but we can't do anything about. What we can do is really think about the integrations. So for example, my company, Josh AI, we integrate with only a small number of projectors, Barco, Sony, companies like that. And the companies that we integrate with, we find to be ethical. We find them to have good advertising and marketing practices. And we find that the way that we're able to recommend their products and vice versa really help to sort of build trust with the consumer. We're not recommending some ABC projector company that no one's ever heard of, partly because we don't want to add credibility to these brands and these products that aren't in fact very credible. And so I understand that Epson is playing more in the direct-to-consumer game. They're selling to people that don't always have integrated solutions. And that's a beast I certainly cannot tackle at this moment. But I think if a client or an integrator is selling an integrated solution, that's where we can be much more vigilant about these products that we integrate with together should meet certain standards. And I think those standards need to include not just their properties and their reliability, but how they message to their consumers.
Yeah, very much so. Giles, before we get your take on this, I want to throw in another article that comes to us from Residential Tech Today, talking about the quality of content is the fine wine of private cinema. And they go through a really good conversation between a prospective client and the company that he was trying to get them hired for to build this really high performance private cinema, and how he attributed it to wine, in the sense that when you start drinking wine, most people are drinking wine from the supermarket or your local liquor store, and it's probably not necessarily top shelf. it's probably entry level. But as you go down that, wine journey, you find nicer wines and better wines and higher quality wines. And all of a sudden, it's a lot harder to go and pick up that box of wine for $10 at whatever your local grocery store is. When you see the combination of this article and the Epson article, and on one hand, we're talking about specs, and we're selling things based on specs. This projector has this many lumens and it's got a contrast ratio of this. And then you start talking about, getting into your private cinema, and you're trying to, I don't want to say upsell, but you're trying to sell a better experience, which means you need to sell a better product. How do you balance selling based off specs versus based off experience? And what's the delta where those two meet?
Well, I think it's a great question, because actually, when you look at, how you're describing it as fine wine, that's emotive language. It's something that people can really relate to. And you can see with Epson, I guess the problem that really exists is that for the vast majority of consumers, they do buy based on spec. And I guess we're all kind of guilty of that. Is it that Epson have felt compelled to defend their brand in this way at great expense, I'm sure, because there is this, they realize how important it is that people understand what they're reading, because actually the vast majority do. They look at the specs, and that's what influences their buying decision. On the other hand, our industry is really an industry that's built on experience. And actually, part of the problem, I think, is often consumers don't really understand the difference between actually experiencing something that is high quality and how that makes you feel compared to reading a bunch of specs. And I remember seeing a barcode demonstration that was similar to this. It's like, actually on paper, an iPhone camera actually has greater specs than some of these, multi, $1,000 projectors. However, you can't put a value on the quality of optics and the glass quality and everything that's gone into that. And it's something that, which is really sort of captured in this article, is that how do you actually motivate a customer to actually spend the money on this experience? And this is really sort of comparing it to something that they really do understand. And I guess it comes down to, as well, where integrators are trying to determine whether they should have a showroom or an experience center. And I see there seems to be a movement more towards actually building experience centers. I'm seeing now. We've probably seen various changes in the industry where people have gone from having one to not having one. But actually, I see it more so, and Alex probably would you speak to a lot of integrators as well. There seems to be this movement, and I think probably it's back to this original problem. Customers see a bunch of specs and they say, oh, I want that projector, and I actually don't really understand what that means in real terms, and why they should maybe spend a little bit more to get something that actually really replicates that cinematic experience.
So let me ask you both this, or either one of you. Someone answer the question. Is there a point where you'll never get a spec client, someone who's buying based on SPL level or lumen or lux or whatever, depending on whatever you're trying to sell? Is there a point where you'll never convert a spec buyer into an experienced buyer? Or go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. And I think truly the two go hand in hand, because when you have the right specs that are being quoted that are superior, it means a better experience. And so I truly believe the experiential pitch is the better pitch. It's the more emotional pitch. But when you do have those clients who they really want to understand the specific metrics, the specs, they want to compare them, the specs need to be able to back up that experience. So to Giles' point, or I don't know if it was Matt or Giles, but one of you talking about Barco, the reality is there needs to be some way to quantify why the better quality optics are going to provide a better experience. And I think that's on the work of the manufacturers to say, these are the metrics that matter, and this is how we compare to others. And therefore, while the experience is better, and we can talk about that all day long, if you need to have a numbers-based argument, we're going to be able to show you they're X and we're 2X. We have an improved, set of metrics around it. I think that's going to be true of most products. There might be a couple outliers, but just I'm kind of going through thinking lighting, HVAC, projectors, sound. Most products are going to have clear metrics that should be able to help amplify that story. Why does this experience sound better? Well, for these very specific reasons.
Yeah, very good.
I wonder if we are the only really kind of channel within the AV channel that really do sell that way, though. And the reason I sort of say that is I wonder if when you're buying a TV, if you go into a retailer, whether they will mention the E word, or whether it will all be, oh, you should go for this one because it's got this. And actually, maybe we are the only channel that's really sort of tuned into the customer experience more than anything else. And that's just something that, it just dawned on me just then, is that, if you look at the TV industry, there were brands like Bang & Olufsen and Lerva that were really, focused in on that high quality performance. And actually, in a way, the big brands have kind of won in a way, which was all spec driven. So it's, it's an interesting concept, really.
Yeah, but tech has always been so heavily focused on spec, and I always attribute it to the auto industry, where you can have multiple cars that go 0 to 60, but the experience of going 0 to 60 in a Mercedes or a Porsche is significantly better for most people than doing it in an Odyssey or an Accord. They're both still, cars or SUVs or vans, but the experience is dramatically different. And when you go into a high-end auto dealership, they'll talk spec if you want to talk spec, but they'll also talk the experience of getting into that quilted leather seat and feeling the, massaging seats as you're rolling down the highway.
Yeah, I was just going to throw out a couple different things that are coming to mind. The first one is, I certainly see in consumer products, spec is often being pitched, but people are radically confused. I see it with camera equipment, certainly with televisions, but a lot of the in-person experiences are focused on, let me show you what an OLED screen looks like. Let me show you what an 8K versus a 4K screen looks like in person. And I feel like as we're moving more towards online shopping, especially during COVID, it's changing the whole game of how do you experience these products when all you're doing is going on Amazon.com and hitting purchase for the one that's got, the right price and maybe some good looking reviews. And so when I think about our industry, I actually feel like for a long time, we've not been focused on the experience nearly as much as we should. And I'm generalizing, I'm looking across, we now work with 600 integrators across the US and Canada. And the average amongst those dealers are still selling proposals that are, 50 line items with very technical sounding products where the clients don't understand, what is this thing? Why do I need this? I see a big price point, but I don't really get it. And Giles and I, late night in Vegas one night with a bunch of Control 4 friends, we're talking about how can we help the sort of proposal process be more experiential. And so we were talking about, instead of having specific brands for lighting and for music and for your projector, which some clients might know or they might not know, can an integrator do a better job at basically creating the proposal based on their experience? So an example would be, if your firm is, ABC, AV company, well, could you have a line item that says whole house surround sound music? Here's the price point. If you want the details, we'll give you the details, but you're choosing whether or not you want that whole home audio experience, and you go down line item by line item and basically sell it based on not what is the product name, but what is the user experience? What is it that they get out of it? We don't see a lot of that. And I'll tell you, as someone that 5 years ago was not in this industry, I get reached out all the time by friends saying, hey, I don't know if I'm getting ripped off by my AV guy. Can you take a look at this proposal? Does this make sense to you? And I look at it and it literally looks Greek. We all on this call understand it, but the consumer has no idea what these products or these brands mean. And I think we can do a better job at selling the experience as an industry.
Well, and if I can comment on that for a second, what I find interesting is I agree 100%. We do need to move to that. We need to get out of line listing. I've been a proponent of that for years. What I find interesting personally is my company's gone that way. We don't ever line list anything. The pushback from most clients is fairly dramatic most times because they're not used to it. So you end up having to explain to your client, you're not only selling them on you and your service, but you're also selling them on every piece or every solution that you've put into that proposal. And often it becomes this whole, well, I know, but what TV am I getting? It's like, well, it's here, but this is what that room's going to do. This is what you want, right? Yeah. But what's going in the room? Stuff.
That's so interesting because I hear the opposite all the time. I hear people who say, there's this line item that says, this Ruckus blah, blah, blah network or this Sony XBR, blah, blah, blah TV. And they're like, but I don't know why I want this item. So yeah. I think it's probably, you can't go too far in either extreme.
It's a give and take. Yeah. And I think at least most of our customers seem to have found that we've got a comfortable balance where we can provide some level of technical detail so that they kind of understand what they're actually paying for. But it's still not, hey, you're buying this piece and 4 keystones and this and 8 feet of wire. Because it's
the other option. I recently did this for a board book. We put together sort of an initial 1-page outline of all the high level points, sort of more the experiential stuff. And then we had a 50-page, sort of informational packet attached to it so that if you want the details, you've got it. But most people are just going to look at the first page and not go any further. Yeah. So make it available, but don't shove it in their face.
I guess there's even another aspect to this. There's the experience stuff, there's the spec stuff, but then there's also the functional stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like actually, there's that other way of also quoting, which is where you're actually writing a functional description for each space in the home to show that you've understood what the client has asked for. And actually, that's also an element that should be considered as well in all of this. Is actually, when I was an integrator, I went through various different ways of quoting. And sometimes you try and avoid listing, as we've said, any kind of model numbers at all, just to describe how the room is going to operate. But I just show. I think you're right. It's somewhere in the middle of all of these different ways. But I also think when it comes to a home theater, it is extremely difficult to sell any home theater of high value without experiencing one first, so that you can actually have some comparison, some kind of baseline understanding before you spend the money on it.
Yeah, very true. All right, gentlemen, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Alex, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Josh AI, get on the list for next year's Secret Santa, where can they do that?
The website's just josh.ai. We're on all social media, probably most active these days on Instagram, though. So follow us there and love to engage.
I got to check that out. I'm not sure if I'm following you guys on Insta. I know I'm following you, but I may not be following Josh. Mr. Sutton, thank you, sir, for staying up late with us today. Again, congratulations on the new appointment. If people want to connect with you, learn more about CEDIA, get their renewals in, because that's coming up soon as well, where can they do that?
www.cedia.net, and my email, if anyone wants to get in touch, is gsutton@cedia.org. Thanks, Matt, for having me on. It's been a great show.
Of course. Thank you again, both of you. For myself, if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott and pretty much every other social platform. But more importantly, please stop by AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of our other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.